And he's like,
conversation.
man, what are you doing, man? I don't understand. That's who we are. That's what we are. And I said, I get that, but it is who we are. It's what we've been, but I think it's probably limiting some of our growth out of town. And so we've got to in Cincinnati, everybody knows and loves us, and they know who we are. But going out of town, I don't think I sell chili. I think I sell conies and ways, burgers and fries, shakes and Doritos, as you mentioned, So it was kind of a shock to his system, but to his credit, he said, Raj, I think my job might have been on the line when he said this, but he said, you're in charge, you know best, I'm behind you.
As promised, joined by the CEO of Gold Star, Roger David. And Roger, I got to start off with an apology, actually, because I spent that whole segment talking about your family's history with Gold Star, but it's actually Glizzy Star now. You guys have changed the name. I saw the fabrication of the new signage and everything.
We're letting the interns run the show for a little while.
Yeah, that seems like a great idea.
It's a lot of fun.
Glizzy Star being the center of a marketing campaign where for a limited time people can get two conies, two Cincy Glizzies.
Cincy Glizzies for $5.13.
Are we? Did we?
513.
Are we allowed to say Glizzies on television? Is that something that is okay for us to do?
I think it's safe.
Roger, I appreciate you coming on. I'm so interested at you being at the helm of a company that your family started that's been going for decades in this city. It is an institution. I wasn't kidding when I talked about it. Next to the Gold Star is a way of giving directions here in this city. Do you ever have moments where you sit back and just marvel at the magnitude of that?
It's been incredible. I mean, we started in 1965 as Gold Star. We've had it's been a great run. I worked there 10 years out of college, then went away for 15 and then came back since 2015. And it's been a great experience so far.
Tell me a little bit about your feelings of how food is so important to culture in general, because when your dad and his brothers came here, Cincinnati chili had been around for a little bit, but members of the family were tweaking the recipe, and they wanted to find something that felt a little bit more like home, and then they came around, ended up shaping the culture here with that. That's an amazing impact.
Yeah. It really is. We are a huge chili town. If you take all the restaurants that are around and add them all up, it's probably 2x the McDonald's locations that are in town, if not more. And then you have the grocery store side of the business where it's canned and frozen. And it's typically number one in those categories across the board, beating a lot of the national brands around. And so it's truly a chili town. So to be a part of that fabric is really cool. It's also neat in the way it kind of came about. It was a community effort to grow that chili category here in Cincinnati. And we're the new guy on the block since 1965. The other guys were around for a while, which is fantastic. And it keeps us kind of sharp and kind of more on that innovative edge, I think. So we like being a bit of the challenger.
What do you think about when you know about your family history and the idea that your dad and his brothers crossed half of the world to come here with this sort of entrepreneurial drive? Do you think back to what that is sort of doing to influence your business acumen now?
Their drive and their work ethic to get to where they needed to go was, very common, I think, for a lot of immigrants. It was the American dream, kind of coming to the United States and getting a shot at making a life for yourself, because they were not well off coming here. They were very poor coming to this country. My dad was one of 10 children. They would often, earn a buck here and send it back home to help the family out. Which is not an uncommon storyline, but, they couldn't have done it without some people in the community kind of supporting them and rallying behind them. And so Cincinnati was such a hospitable place to be, and it really worked out well.
How often would you hear stories from your dad and your uncles about those early days?
Yeah, very frequently. And it typically had a lot to do with something funny that has happened in the past. You know, my dad lived in an apartment with 3 other guys, and they would have to cut each other's hair because they didn't want to spend a buck to go get a haircut. And so they had a great time. It's interesting, you know, you think, you know, prosperity and wealth over time kind of, you know, can feed, you know, some degree of happiness and security, perhaps security. But in those early days, the stories all came, their best times were when they didn't have much. And that's typically where those great stories kind of came from.
Yeah, the grit, the sand that's in the oyster is what makes the pearl.
Exactly.
Do you, now that you've been at the helm, you became president and CEO of Gold Star about 10 years ago, a little bit more than that. What is that sense of you of the stewardship that you have for this thing that was created by your family, that has shaped the culture of this city, that you are trying to lead forward? That's got to be a weird burden of like wanting to acknowledge and appreciate the past, but then also think about what's next.
You know, I will tell you, if, you know, I worked there for 10 years out of college, and then got my MBA at Xavier, and then went away for 15. If I did not go away for those 15, I'm not sure what value I was going to be able to bring back to the family business. And those 15 years helped shape me to look at the business not through a family lens, not through a family business lens, but look at it through a business that has to be very competitive in a very competitive industry. And so it was as if kind of some of that emotional attachment to the business kind of took a back seat to just business decisions. And, you know, my, you know, fellow shareholders and board were extremely supportive and continue to be. It's been a great relationship with them, managing through the change. One of the hardest things was, you know, expanding the menu, making, you know, fresh burgers made to order.
Yeah, you brought back the burgers, by the way, which are really good.
From Hamburger Heaven, and they've been fantastic. And we got a great following around those burgers. The double bacon cheeseburger is my favorite. And so that's been great. So we've addressed kind of the menu. We've addressed the facility. We've gone through and we've remodeled every location. I think we have one left to go through. And then the last leg of the stool is really around hospitality and ensuring that we stay competitive in that space as well.
Now, that's all part of a big investment to retool and remarket and sort of reshape what Gold Star has been, which, I mean, that's got to be really challenging because you're operating a company in a city where so many people have so many thoughts and opinions. I think I found a quote from you talking about what it was like just at the introduction of the idea of a foot-long coney and the reaction that you got to that.
We were nervous. We thought Cincinnati was going to revolt against, you know, changing this little tiny thing that they've grown to love, and we're like, let's just give it a try and see what happens.
We're trying to give you more of it, right?
We're trying to give you more. You know, I do recall an awesome moment with my late Uncle Frank. He was in my office, and I said, you know, Frank, we're gonna drop the word chili from the trademark.
I bet that was a really interesting
And he's
conversation.
like, man, what are you doing, man? I don't understand. That's who we are. That's what we are. And I said, I get that, but you know, it is who we are. It's what we've been, but I think it's probably limiting some of our growth out of town. And so we've got to, like, you know, in Cincinnati, everybody knows and loves us, and they know who we are. But going out of town, you know, I don't think I sell chili. I think I sell conies and ways. Burgers and fries, you know, shakes and Doritos, as you mentioned, you know. So it was kind of a shock to his system, but to his credit, he said, you know, Raj, I think my job might have been on the line when he said this, but he said, you know, you're in charge, you know best, you know, I'm behind you.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, that's really difficult for you, especially with the idea that it's a family business, right? This isn't just about having meetings in an office and then going home and then waiting until 9 o'clock the next day to go back in. These are people that you grew up with. These are people that like changed your diapers. And then now you're telling them a big change that you want to do. That's really hard.
It was hard, and it is hard, and I can't can't tell you how wonderful they've been about it. You know, you just want to always get invited back to Thanksgiving dinner, and as long as that's happening, I'm on the right track.
Well, so, and then, you know, another part of that was to, you know, really, you talked in that video about having a great relationship with franchisees anyways. Increasing efficiency and sustainability and, you know, continuing to build franchise relations. That's really sort of the hook of what the future means in general, right?
You know, it's interesting because really you have to be a franchisee advocate, because without them, you don't have a business. You know, they're the backbone behind it all. And so you have to bring them with you. They expect you to have the leadership ability to stay fresh in the industry and to bring them information, because oftentimes they're in the weeds, kind of just blocking and tackling at the store level. And so it's, you know, it's been a great relationship with them. And, you know, and it's always great when you're growing and, you know, selling more. It's always a lot easier.
Is that a difficult thing to balance too, if you're already sort of having to, you know, just deal with the idea of being at the head of a family business, but then also wanting to maintain such good relationships with your franchisees? You're sort of serving to at least two masters, right?
Change is always the hardest part, right? And then, you know, you have some franchisees that are doing great and don't think changes is necessary. And you have others that, you know, welcome change because they see the opportunity in it. It's managing that is the biggest challenge, I think, with them.
Speaking of big challenges and big recent challenges, you know, certainly the restaurant industry was really specifically affected when COVID hit, and there were, you know, people weren't able to go to a space, weren't able to go to a restaurant and sit down for a period of time. You know, obviously everybody had different moves to deal with it in some way or another, but how did that feel to you? Did that feel like a watershed moment?
You know, it was interesting. Initially, I thought this thing's going to blow over, right? And I think many of us did. But we were able to pivot pretty quickly. And I think because we had drive-thrus in every location, we were able to still service the customer base and you know, protect our workers at the time as well, our team. So we were able to figure it out. And I think a lot of other folks did. A lot of folks did not. But we were lucky to have drive-thrus and still be able to service everybody. Having
the drive-thru was certainly a built-in, almost lifeboat on that whole thing.
It certainly was, no doubt.
The drive-thru was kind of was a big innovation for the family early on, right? That when doing the franchising and really entrepreneurializing like that.
I will claim that Gold Star was the first chili restaurant to have a drive-thru, and it goes back to just kind of our innovative roots. You know, whether it's the foot-long cheese coney or the drive-thru or bringing the burgers back. You know, we've always felt like innovation is really kind of, has got to fuel us.
And now you're innovating with some Glizzy Max.
Yeah, Glizzy Star, you know, you get 2 Glizzies for $5.13.
Did you have to run the new name by some of the family before this appearance here?
You know what, like I said, we let the interns run the show. They just blew right through, you know, they skipped the board, they skipped me practically, you know, and they just took it over, so. It's been great.
That's great. Roger David is the CEO and president of Gold Star. We've got more with him when we come back. We're going to talk about that time when you had to go away for a little bit to learn and bring that information back to the company. Roger, you know, something that drives me crazy when people are doing shows and they make a reference to the audience about how, boy, I wish I could talk about what we just talked about in a commercial break. Yeah. But something that we were talking about in the break just now was the idea of having a customer base that is so loyal and has such an emotional connection to the product you're making, and how that is, you know, the people over at Black & Decker don't have to worry about that as much when they're making a drill. That's it, but it's a double-edged sword, but that's what every business owner wants, right?
It really is. You know, building a brand is about creating that emotional connection. And, you know, Cincinnati natives and, you know, Cincinnatians in general are very, very emotional about their chili choices. And so we have a great following that, you know, who some of them are really upset that we're changing the name to Glizzy Star, and they're very, very vocal about it. And we have some that are excited about a potential change here, and so it's really great. But it can also be tough because sometimes, you know, when you're trying to build share, you've got some folks that are very ingrained in their chili choice. So having those emotional connections is great. You just want them all for yourself.
That's right. Yeah. Just taking the good with the bad sometimes. Your particular history with this family company, were you born right when the things got started? Not to age you, but
you're aging me perfectly aligned with the Gold Star journey. So, you know, 1964 is when I was born, and 65 is when we were officially Gold Star Chili.
Wow, so you have just come up where the family business has always been a thing, and God, there had to have been conversations where your folks were talking about like you were the future of this thing.
Yeah, there must have been at some point, right? You know, so it was my father and 3 of his brothers started it back in 1965, and they all kind of played a role in its evolution. And I remember being a kid and my dad bringing home cheese conies, and you know, I had no idea he was making them and bringing them home at the time.
Yeah.
You know? And then later on in life, you figure out, you know, kind of what the story is, and then, you know, the next thing you know, you and all your high school buddies are hanging out in one of our restaurants, and it was just a lot of fun growing up with it.
Yeah, I mean, it was just that was what life was, and you came up as a dishwasher, and worked your way up in the company, right?
Yeah. Yes, I did, and as it should be. And you know, when I first took the role as CEO, I worked in the commissary. I was on the trucks delivering. I got back into the restaurants because you've got to know the business at that level in order to make, in my opinion, the appropriate decisions moving forward. So,
and then a little bit of marketing after college. You came back to Gold Star. Where'd you go to school?
Yeah, went to the University of Cincinnati for undergrad and Xavier for grad school.
All right. Well, listen, you
kept
it all local.
Man. I'm trying to keep it all right there.
And so after college, came back and did some marketing for the company for a while.
For about 10 years, and then left for about 15 and got into the brand consultancy space. Learned a ton about how to be competitive and how to differentiate your brand from the next guy's brand.
Was the intention with that always to come back and let me go out and learn some strategies and bring it back to it?
I wish I was that clairvoyant, I guess, but no, it really wasn't. And all of this came about not in a very scripted way or strategic way. It was kind of about opportunities and how they kind of aligned. You know, we had, you know, for 25 years of the company's existence, the first 25 years was family run. The second 25 years, we had non-family members running the business. So for the family to make a decision in 2015 to allow a family member to come in and be the CEO of the company took a little bit of time to get everybody aligned around that idea, because there's some risk involved with that, right? And you know, we're a tight family. You know, my mother and father each have 10 brothers and sisters, and so you know, family is very important to us. So you know, do we want to take the chance on kind of ruffling some feathers over here on the family side? I've been blessed in the sense that they've been absolutely fabulous to work with. They've allowed me and my management team to do what's best for the business, and so it's been great.
What would you think? What would you say is the top thing that you picked up on those years when you were working for the other branding companies that you brought back and that has helped the company now?
Meaningful differentiation. If your brand does not have meaningful differentiation to your target audience, then you're just going to be, you know, another brand in the sea kind of thing. You've got to have meaningful differentiation. And for us, that meant telling our story. That meant expanding the menu. That meant making sure facilities are updated and current and appeal to the consumer of today. And that means the appropriate degree of hospitality, changing it's a dynamically changing restaurant customer today who wants their product on their terms even more so than ever. Whether it's the drive-through or through DoorDash or pickup or dine-in, it's just you've got a lot more points that you need to be addressing in a more consistent fashion.
Yeah, you've seen the industry change quite a bit just since you became CEO. The rise of the delivery services alone is a sea change. We talked about just the importance of the drive-through just a few years back.
Yeah, it really has been. And you know, today the consumer more than ever defines your brand, where historically what you would advertise and what you would push was really influential. Today, it's really not that way. It's the consumer reactions and what you get from an online presence and their opinions really is how your brand is being defined. And you got to win them one at a time.
Well, and finding connections and being able to come to people at their level, and certainly appealing to your intern-aged base with the glizzy maxing is, that's clearly that's an effort to come to somebody where they're at, and that's what anybody has to do nowadays.
And that's what we're doing, and we're having fun with it. And like I said earlier, we're letting the interns run the show, and I love letting them run the show.
What does it mean for you? There's a phrase that I think I found in one of your previous interviews about brands are built at the table side, which involves quality of product, right?
Yeah, yes, and hospitality more than anything. That's one thing I think my family has kind of ingrained in us is the sense of hospitality, and it kind of goes back to their roots. And I could go on for hours talking about the hospitality of the Middle East when you experience it versus listening to it via news programs.
Well, and again, that gets back to the cultural aspect of what food does, right?
Yeah,
it makes people feel at home. It makes people feel connection.
No doubt about it. It unifies us. Unifies us within our cultures, but it unifies us across cultures as well.
Part of the expansion that you guys have been a part of also was acquiring Tom & Chi, which was a local company that hit it really big on Shark Tank.
They did,
and that was something that you brought into the fold.
Yeah.
How has that been? I mean, that's a big change from what Gold Star was to bringing in a whole different menu into the group.
Yeah. So Tom & Chi was a lot of fun early on in that 2017 time period. The original owners were running into some struggles trying to grow and keep that chain kind of moving forward. They probably grew too fast and didn't have some infrastructure in place. Yeah. So when we acquired them, we knew it was going to be a bit of an uphill battle. And then just as we were kind of relaunching the brand, COVID hit. And when COVID hit, it really knocked them down. They did not have drive-throughs, which we mentioned earlier. They were not able to pivot quickly enough to be able to deal with any of the delivery services at the time, and that was still relatively new back then. Or even set up pickup stand. A lot of restaurants were setting up spots where you can go pick up food and take it home, and so. A lot of locations across the country started to close. And as that was happening, we saw a complete kind of revitalization within the Gold Star brand as we were expanding the menu and remodeling. And so it didn't take much for us to go, okay, well, we're going to focus over here and continue to invest in the Gold Star side of the equation. And we watched that kind of thrive at that point. And so we still have some Tom & Chi locations around, and we're still very proud of the work we've done with, for the Tom & Chi brand. And so there, go get a Tom & Chi sandwich.
Well, and I would think that, well, first of all, I mean, it's so counterintuitive that COVID caused issues with that, because having a grilled cheese and a bowl of soup when everybody's sick, that feels like a good go-to.
Feels perfect, right?
Yeah. How has that been as far as, talking about the franchise element and knowing how Cincinnati chili parlors are really well defined here? You don't need to do a lot of explaining to people here, but in terms of trying to expand outside of this region, I would think that the Tom & Chi brand would be helpful in that.
Right. It would be a little easier, you would think, And, we kind of switched it up from grilled cheese to melts to try to address a value concern. And then, we actually have a Gold Star Tom & Chi combination out in Anderson. Oh, right. So you can get melts there, and you can also get your favorite chili dish.
That sounds like if that catches on, look out, Lexington. Yeah. So you talked about honoring the past and innovations that are going on right now. Other than the glizzy maxing that we're in the middle of, what do you think about 5-10 years down the road as far as other innovations or something that you'd like to get the company, a place you'd like to get the company to?
Our hospitality is our focus right now. There's a lot of AI conversations that are happening with our industry. I think at the end of the day, still, it's a people business, so you can only push that part of it so far. Our hope is to continue try to expand outside of the Cincinnati market. And I think we're setting the right foundation to do that, both on the investment side, the menu, and the way we have our systems to support our franchisees.
I think that's great. Roger David is the president and CEO of Gold Star. It is a Cincinnati icon, a family company that's been going here for decades, influenced by the local culture and then shaping it for decades. What would your dad or Uncle Tufig, who everybody followed, what in the world would their take be on all this?
That's a really interesting thought, and I've thought of it in the past, and it'd be amazing. I would to understand what their reaction would be to see where we are today would be a true dream.
That's an incredible, being able to think about that, I think is a really special thing. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
We've got to take a break. We are going to be continuing the Glizzy Max here again. 2 Cincy Glizzies for $5.13 for a limited time at Gold Star. Thanks to Roger David for coming on the show.